You've got companies that build cars or smartphones, but what about a company that builds other companies? Well, there was this pretty infamous company out of Berlin that did just that, and they did it at a scale and speed that just blew the tech world away. This is the story of Rocket Internet. It's a wild question, right? I mean, it flies in the face of everything we think we know about entrepreneurship. The lone genius in a garage, the passion for a totally unique idea. But what if you could industrialize the whole thing?
So this company, founded back in 2007 by the Samware brothers, set out on this incredibly bold and, let's be honest, controversial mission. And its story really forces us to rethink the very nature of building a business from the ground up.
Their goal? Well, it was nothing short of audacious. They wanted to become the world's largest internet platform outside of the US and China. And their method for getting there was to turn the art of creating a new venture into a factory process. This is the label that really stuck to them, and for good reason. See, Rocket Internet's big idea, their core insight, was that the riskiest part of a startup isn't the execution, it's the idea itself. So they just decided to separate the two. They'd find a business model that was already working somewhere else, and then build a machine to execute it again and again and again. But what did this startup assembly line actually look like in practice? How did it work? Okay, let's go inside the machine and deconstruct it. It was this ruthlessly efficient three-step process. First, find a winner. We're talking a Zappos clone for Southeast Asia or an Uber clone for Latin America. Second, instead of waiting around for some passionate founder to show up, they would literally procure a team of ambitious business school grads and just plug them into a pre-built infrastructure. And third, launch and grow with absolutely blinding speed, often going live in a new country in just a few weeks. This model completely flips the word founder on its head. A traditional entrepreneur is driven by a unique idea, they get a huge chunk of the company. But a rocket founder? They were more like a highly skilled general manager, recruited from consulting or banking, given a tiny 5 to 10% stake, and then subjected to intense top-down control. It really challenges that whole myth of the lone, passionate visionary. And that control? Oh man, it was legendary. This quote from a leaked email from the CEO, Oliver Samwer, gives you a raw, unfiltered look at the culture. It was brutally data-driven, super aggressive, and just relentlessly demanding. If you underperformed, it wasn't just frowned upon, it was punished. So as you can imagine, this extreme model kicked off a huge debate. On one side, you had a lot of experts who looked at this machine and saw a stroke of absolute genius, a brilliant innovation in how you build companies.
The main argument for Rocket was that it basically created this system of, low-risk entrepreneurship. It took the wild, unpredictable, messy process of starting a company and systematically tried to squeeze out all the biggest points of failure.
I mean, just think about it for a second. The risk of the technology? Basically zero. It was already proven. The market risk? Way lower, since the original company proved that people actually wanted this thing. The team risk? Minimized, because Rocket handpicked and controlled them. This freed up the founders to focus 100% on execution instead of constantly trying to raise money. It's a really powerful argument for pure efficiency. Okay, but for every person who thought this was genius, there was a critic who saw something deeply flawed, something unnatural and unsustainable. They argued that you just can't manufacture a truly great company on an assembly line. And Professor Robert M. Grant, he really nailed this sentiment. The critique is that while the model looks great on paper, it's just not natural. It misses those key ingredients that actually allow startups to survive and thrive in the real, competitive world. And here's the really crucial point. The traditional startup world, it's a brutal filter. Thousands of ideas compete for attention and funding, and only the absolute strongest survive each round. Critics argue that Rocket's top-down process completely bypassed the very system that forges resilient, battle-tested companies. And look, the case against them was pretty compelling. First off, that clone label made it really hard to be taken seriously. But more importantly, would a founder with only a tiny slice of the company have that same 24/7 relentless drive to build a billion-dollar unicorn? The model also seemed limited to pretty simple e-commerce plays, creating companies that had no unique technology, no real intellectual property, which left them totally defenseless down the road. So where does that leave us? Was Rocket Internet just some kind of bizarre one-off? Or was it a sign of something bigger? To really answer that, we have to put it in the broader landscape of how new companies get made.
Well, when you actually put Rocket's model side by side with other approaches, you really see just how unique it was. It's nothing like incubators such as Y Combinator, which nurture original ideas with very little control. And it's not like corporate spinouts either. Rocket was all about cloning external ideas with absolute centralized control. Its entire advantage came from specializing purely on execution.
At the end of the day, the final verdict on Rocket Internet, it's still kind of out. The company has had some massive wins and some spectacular losses, but its whole experiment forces us to ask a much bigger, more profound question about the nature of progress itself.
I mean, really think about it. So many of today's biggest innovators, from Google to Facebook, they started out by copying and then improving on an existing idea. So maybe the clone factory, for all of its flaws, just made that process explicit. It forces us to wonder, could today's copycats really become tomorrow's true innovators?